Hi everyone, welcome to Lecture 22. I hope you're all staying safe and doing alright. We're going to jump into responsive web design. You've probably heard me say the phrase responsive web design like a million times since we started this semester, followed by we'll get to what it is later in the class. So it's finally later, and we're going to jump into it, and it's going to be fun. So, first of all, what is it? Responsive web design is the approach that suggests that design and development should respond to the user's behavior and environment based on screen size, platform, and orientation. What this means is, as the user switches from viewing a site on their laptop to their iPad to their phone, the website should automatically switch to accommodate. The website should be able to respond to the user's preferences. So, what this prevents is the developer from having to create a different application or website for every single device on the web, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, making one for everything that exists would take forever. That's like actually making a separate HTML page, separate CSS for every type of device that you could possibly think of. And so it's not really scalable. Before, at the early stages of the web, it was pretty much limited to desktop computers, and we had a lot of fixed layout websites, and they only really looked nicely if you viewed them on that specific screen size. So if you were on a desktop computer, it would only really look nicely there. So when phones started having the capability where you could view websites on them, things began to change a little bit. So a lot more people started using their phones more, mobile usage crept up, and has since surpassed web usage on desktop. So more people are browsing on their phones than on computers nowadays. And so as this started to happen, businesses started making websites that would work on mobile devices. At the beginning, this meant that they would make an application that was entirely separate from the desktop version. So you may have seen this. There are still a number of them on the web today, and you can spot them by looking at the address bar on a mobile browser, and you might see something like m.homedepot.com. That was a site that used to have them, Home Depot, or mobile.homedepot.com. And that M.dot site, as they're called, they were entirely separate websites that were served up when you visited them on a small screen. So, as you can imagine, this is not super scalable and can be a giant pain in the ass for businesses when they have to maintain two entirely different copies of a website. So you might need developers that can work on the mobile one versus one that can work on the desktop. So here I have an image. This is Dropbox.com, and I'm just taking the side of the browser and I'm scaling it. So as you can see, it gets smaller, the text size changes, the image size changes, the elements like that white sidebar move to a different spot, and a lot more navigation items are hid behind that what's called a hamburger menu, those three little lines. And this is kind of what we're going to be shooting for as we learn responsive web design, is just this ability to have the one single code base, one website that can display differently depending on the screen size and the user's preferences. So where did it come from? Ethan Marcotti is attributed with coining the term. He wrote this article called Responsive Web Design in 2010 for an online publishing site called A List Apart, and I definitely recommend reading the article. It's a little dated now, it's 10 years old, but the concepts still apply to how we create responsive layouts today. In 2013, Mashable, which is a website that publishes a lot of technical articles as well, called 2013 the year of responsive web design. And in the 7 years that have passed since then, it's only increased. So at this point, making a website responsive is kind of assumed when you're making a new website. Marcotti also wrote this book, Responsive Web Design, which goes into detail on how to make responsive websites and why we would want that. And I definitely recommend buying it and reading it if this is something that you want to go forward with. Additionally, making sites responsive is also cost effective for businesses because you don't have to maintain all the different versions of it. And finally, Google started rewarding websites that would make them or started rewarding companies that would make their websites responsive by boosting them in their search results. So I don't know if I can't remember if we talked about search engine optimization, but basically you can do certain things to your website to make it appear earlier in Google search results. And Google started saying that if your site was responsive, they'd be more likely to give you that boost up in your search results, which you want so that users find your site instead of your competitors and then click on it. We have a tendency to borrow terminology and concepts from previous media, in this case print and graphics, and this makes sense. So when you have a new field like web design, back when it was new, I mean there wasn't a lexicon for the technology yet, so they used what they knew, in which was print and graphic design terminology, and they applied them to the web. So we often think about the web browser as a blank canvas in which we can craft our websites using HTML and CSS. So the problem is that once we've created these beautiful canvases in our websites and our pixel widths of our sidebars, once they're live, they're at the mercy of the user and their font sizing preferences. If they have a visual disability, they might be using accessibility devices like a screen reader, or the screen might be a cell phone versus an iPad or your desktop, and it might be using an old phone that has a bad resolution. So once our beautifully created canvas is in front of a user, you don't know how they're going to be viewing it. So web design development is a dynamic medium, and it's not sustainable to make a different website for every device. So the answer to all of our problems, or at least most of them, is to make a responsive website. Here I have a screenshot from Material.io, which just has a list of a lot of the top devices that you could use them on, or that you could use, and it includes phones and tablets and even watches. We don't think about making a website that would work on a watch, but that's a new concept as well. And we also need to think about devices that haven't even been invented yet. So, I mean, before the iPhone came out, we didn't really think about being able to jump on your phone and surf the web, at least not easily. And now that it's there, we had to come up with a way that our sites would work on that kind of device. And so in the future, we might have something entirely different from what we are familiar with now, and we want our websites to be able to work on those. It's funny, the other day I was curious about what my personal website would look like on a Kindle, and for the most part it loaded correctly. My Kindle is black and white, so I mean some of the contrast and stuff I could definitely work on, but it was a good experiment in just using a website that you've created on a medium that you wouldn't expect people to be viewing it on. So Marcotti lists in his book 3 ingredients for making a responsive website, and those 3 are a flexible grid-based layout, flexible images and media, and finally media queries, which is from the CSS3 specification. So using these 3, we can make websites that respond and adapt to users' needs within the constraints of the user's device or browser window. So over the next couple of classes, we're going to dive into all 3 of these, and you'll get a lot of practice making responsive layouts. Thank you.